Ever.
Right.
Okay.
Like a good bottle of wine. Let's let it breathe. Let it breathe. Let it breathe. Feel the universe breathe. They say where there's breath, there's hope, Cease. And we're live. Sigmund Bloom taking the lead here as we're going to go over the Senior Bowl. And as always, our man at the Senior Bowl, Cecil Lammey, having his phone blow up. Go back to a clue for a clue to the news and note show we just did. Cease, first, before we jump into going over the position groups, always illustrious Senior Bowl, just impressions, because I got a text, speaking of phone blowing up, from our mutual close friend, our hermano, Mark Folletti, reminiscing about Ed Orgeron when we saw him, hat in hand, really wanting anybody just to give him a chance,
Right.
to coach up a defensive lineman or something. And then on the occasion that he gets this extension and he's on top of the football world. And it's just a reminder of how the next chapter is always being written. What are your overall impressions of the next chapter in the Senior Bowl saga?
Yeah, and the Senior Bowl itself, I think it's gotten so big that it's too big for Mobile. And it's something where can they think about moving it to Houston, think about moving it to Atlanta, something like that, because yet again, we got another day that was rained out and move inside. And I know it's going to move to the South Alabama fields, but once again, we saw in Mobile, I mean, this is the place where things happen. This is the place where jobs are had, where connections are made. And it was interesting also to see the XFL guys, including our good friend Eric Galco, kicking around. Oliver Luck was in attendance there. Of course, all the agents, Drew Rosenhaus, everybody under the sun was there. And we got to see Josh McDaniels, Bloom. And I've been doing this for 14 years. I've never seen Josh McDaniels there before. So Belichick there with Saban, yeah. But little Josh McD kicking around too, maybe trying to patch things up around the league. But always a good time and always where things are set in motion. And that's what happened once again at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, changes. Dante Scarnecchia retiring again, end of an era again. Lots of things changing. Lots of different names on that staff. Different names on the Senior Bowl roster this year, starting with the North quarterbacks. Shea Patterson, Michigan. Anthony Gordon, Washington State. And Mike Leach, now down to Mississippi State, says, hey, Washington State quarterbacks, remember Gardner Minshew.
Right.
Don't underestimate those guys. And Jordan Love from Utah State, and he's going to be a polarizing draft prospect depending on whether you view quarterbacks as projections or you view quarterbacks based more on their film. We know who they are, who they're going to be. Who were they in Mobile?
Yeah, well, Shea Patterson, outside of maybe like one good throw, didn't really have a good week. And we kind of knew that, somebody might pick him up late round, undrafted, what have you. Some tools, some moxie, but definitely not an NFL starter, in my opinion. When you look at Anthony Gordon, you bring him up. Washington State, they call him system quarterback. Fine, the system's in the league now. And you saw with Gordon, he's not going to throw across his body. He's not going to make these big throws downfield. But if it's short to intermediate, he's going to make generally quick decisions and generally good decisions. Now, I saw Gardner Minshew at this game last year. It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same guy. Maybe Minshew's a better mustache, a little more moxie, what have you. But Gordon is a guy that someone's going to take in the 5th round. And if he's pressed into starting duty, it's not going to be too big for him because he's made thousands of decisions as a passer. Jordan Love is the guy to talk about. Jordan Love is the guy that could be a top 10 pick. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bloom, but look at his final season at Utah State, where he lost all 5 offensive linemen, his 2 best receivers, his best running back, who's playing in the Super Bowl this week, Darwin Thompson, also, I believe, his quarterback coach and his head coach. Like, he lost everything. I don't know why he stayed. And when he was asked at media day, Jordan Love kind of just moved on from it. Like, I love my team and all that kind of stuff. But most guys would just bail and either transfer or go to the NFL. Jordan Love was in the conversation last year, maybe not as a top 10 pick. And he was out there looking outstanding. Now, mechanically, he's beautiful. It's brilliant. His mechanics, his footwork, his setup, his delivery over the top. Jordan Love is perfect from a mechanical standpoint. You look at the way he forces the ball. He was the guy at practice that was trying to make every play, right? We'll get to Justin Herbert when we talk about the South team because Herbert was the best quarterback there. But Love was the guy who was trying to make every throw, trying to attack every coverage, trying to go and make tight window throws that maybe other quarterbacks would shy away from in this process. You know, Bloom, as we've seen this game for years and years and years, it's every drill. It's the same guys doing the same thing. And you'll see an approach. Some take a very business-like approach, and there's my check down. There's my intermediate throw. Love was like, forget that. He's firing all day long, which, you know, can be a positive and a negative. Some people saying dash or Pat Mahomes. I don't want to say that, but he is a playmaker, and he definitely didn't shy away from those playmaking tendencies in Mobile. Now being talked about as a top 10 pick. I know the Colts like him. I know the Raiders like him. Both of them are outside of the top 10. So, yeah, Jordan Love, a first-round pick, no doubt. I don't think he makes quite the jump that Carson Wentz did, who was seen as a late first-rounder and then moved his way up to 2 based on Senior Bowl and other things, of course. But Carson Wentz stole our souls at the Senior Bowl. With Jordan Love, maybe not quite that jump, but certainly mid-first-rounder at the very least for this guy.
Yeah, and maybe overshadowed. We'll get to the South. Let's go ahead and get through the rest of the North roster, though. And move on to the running backs. And there's a lot of running back talent in this class. Maybe not necessarily senior talent, but talent nonetheless in Mobile. Josh Kelly from UCLA, JaMychal Hasty from Baylor, and Darius Anderson from TCU. What did you think of those North running backs? And by the way, don't even try to make sense of how they do North and South and
right.
universities.
Whatever it is, that's fine. But Josh Kelly's the guy to talk about here. And honestly, when I go through my notes, the running backs, and it's difficult to tell because there's no tackling, no live tackling to the ground. So as a runner, you're looking mainly for movement, for burst, for change of direction ability. That's where Josh Kelly comes into play. You're also looking how they do in backs on backers, where he performed well, where they're doing one-on-one drills, pass protection drills, basically, where a linebacker's coming in full throttle and you got to stop the guy. He was quite capable of doing that. And then also as a receiver out of the backfield, something that it's not in vogue as everyone's doing it. You got to have a running back that can catch. Kelly showed that. So he showed good vision, showed good burst. I like his wiggle and the fact that he can accelerate, stacking moves on top of moves. Good all around. But overall, on both sides, honestly, when we get to the South, it'll be a little bit of the same thing. Like there's a standout guy, everybody else is okay. And in an all-star game, it's difficult to tell from linebackers and running backs because they can't tackle. But Josh Kelly was the best North back this last week.
It's not difficult to tell what you have in wide receivers, or at least in terms of route running, in terms of how they like to set up cornerbacks, some of the best cornerbacks in this class. And the wide receiver class, I was already asked about it in one of my radio spots with Jody Mack, and it's going to be one of the subjects of this year's draft, and it's going to factor into free agent decisions on guys like Robbie Anderson. Look at the North wide receivers, and there's a lot to talk about here. James Prochet, who was on a lot of best of the week lists. Michael Pittman Jr., I know got banged up. We can still talk about him. Denzel Mims, and just what's interesting with Mims, of course, we got Matt Rule in Carolina. Baylor players making the jump. KJ Hill, and we've had quite a parade of Ohio State wide receivers who maybe haven't impressed or put up market share in college, but have certainly translated for the pros. Antonio Gandy-Golden from a small school. And of course, maybe we learn the most, Cease, about the small school players at the Senior Bowl because we see how they fit in or whether they fit in. Chase Claypool, and I'll just toss out there that folks have said Claypool had a good week and maybe bulk him up a little bit and turn him into a receiving tight end. And Courtney Davis from Texas A&M. A lot to talk about, a lot of talent in the North wide receiver group.
Yeah, a lot of talent. And by the way, just from my notes, and again, everyone's seeing things differently. Another thing that we learn on the All-Star road trip, Bloom, is like, you and I can watch practice and see things, one, completely differently or just see different angles of things.
Yeah.
So we take everything in because the players that I have the fewest notes on from this team are Chase Claypool and Courtney Davis, both with fine weeks. They didn't do anything where I noted like, wow, this guy can't play. And we do see that from time to time, especially from, smaller school guys. And then we see the guys that stand out like Antonio, Gandy, Golden, a Matt Waldman favorite. Spoiler alert for the RSP. As I sat there next to Matt at practice, Antonio Gandy-Golden showed off hands concentration and body control. Really, I think my main notes for Gandy-Golden was body control all across the field, in the back of the end zone, working the sidelines, showing that he belongs. Snaring passes, arms extended away from his body. I thought he had a great week. KJ Hill, great week. And it was at this game last year that I saw McLovin, Terry McLaurin, shredding it up, doing his thing. Gives you confidence when you see him drafted into the pros. KJ Hill had a monster week, arguably the best week. Now, I do want to admit, fully out there, like, I went into this game going, Denzel Mims is the guy, I got to watch Denzel Mims. And, you know, you got to kind of temper that a little bit when you go to these games because you don't want to get too excited or start making excuses for a guy. But if you had an argument with me who had a better week, KJ Hill or Denzel Mims, we could go back and forth because they were both outstanding now in different ways. Hill more with strength and burst and run off the catch ability. Denzel Mims was flat out speed. I tweeted out a video from the coach's film as Matt and I would watch practice, go back, do some writing, watch practice again, do some more writing, like fall asleep at random times and then wake up with the South Park Marathon. Bloom, it was an adventure. Wait till Matt tells you his side of things because he had to put up with me for a week. But it was an adventure for sure. And watching practice again, I tweeted out a video of Denzel Mims making this crazy sideline catch, knowing how to work that 4x1, work that sideline, give himself enough room to make a play. So he's not just a decorated track guy who happens to play football. Marquise Goodwin, you know, James Jett for us older guys out there. Remember those? Hey, he's a track guy. Yeah, Mims is a football player that has track speed. He's a receiver that has track speed. And, you know, second round pick, maybe sneaks in and then the first, but this is the greatest wide receiver draft class in NFL history. So a guy like Mims is talented. KJ Hill, as talented as they are, they're probably looking at second round picks. Michael Pittman Jr., for a big receiver, you know, got pushed around, not only at the line of scrimmage, but also at the catch point, which as a big receiver that's known for his large frame and wingspan, you know, that shouldn't happen. So, and he did get banged up too there as well. So we're looking more mid-round for Michael Pittman Jr., ball skills, and certainly his dad, Michael Pittman, fantastic pro. So James Prochet, also the Patriots love him. Shocker, slot receiver, quickness, electricity, right? Let's just make that connection. James Prochet, if you need a slot receiver, he's your guy.
Yeah, just so many talents and so many different types of talents. There's some great voices on Twitter. I think Ben Fennell is one, Brad Kelly too, who like to sort these wide receivers out into their roles, into their strengths, because we can really see wide receivers splitting up into almost different positions. And like you said, Cease, just different teams want different things in receivers. And we say Patriots receiver, people automatically know what that means. Tight end. Now, this is maybe one of the most intriguing positions. And Cease, of course, from our Homer Steelers standpoint, this is a position, you know, I mean, they drafted a tight end last year, but I'd like to see them go back to the well this year. Vance McDonald really fell off. And there's some names here. There's some names. Adam Troutman from Dayton. And again, the small school players. Speaking of small school players, Charlie Taumopao from Portland State, Sean McKeon from Michigan, and Bryson Hopkins from Purdue. Tight ends, you know, two tight end offenses, all the vogue, and these guys are going to be fitting in offenses, but how in the pros?
Yeah, Adam Troutman's a receiver, basically. Big body receiver. The Dayton kid had the best week. He's the one worth mentioning. It's not like the other guys were bad. They just didn't make my notebook that much, even if at all. It is all about Troutman at this position on this team. And he had a bit of hype coming in. Oh, he's a big body receiver. Hey, he can run great routes. And then he kept doing that, kept getting separation on linebackers and team drills, getting open against safeties. So no matter how they sliced it, whether it was down the seam or even a drag route over the middle, Troutman was showing well because he is a receiver and he can line up in the slot. Maybe not an inline guy. Again, there's some blocking, but there's no live tackling, and maybe guys aren't going as hard as they possibly could. So Troutman's got work to do as a blocker there, but he was the lone tight end from the North team to really talk about, and a player will be monitoring in fantasy drafts to be sure.
We go south now. There wasn't necessarily that player. Well, there was. I always remember Pat White, Cease, when I remember our Senior Bowl memories. But Steven Montez, who you saw in your backyard there at Colorado, Jalen Hurts, who did the Oklahoma, Alabama, so he's kind of the local interest player there. And what's interesting about Hurts is he's coming into the league at a time when the league might be more open to embracing his type of skill set at quarterback and crafting an offense around that. And Justin Herbert, if there was a seismic, you talk about Carson Wentz, if there was anything seismic with respect to the top of the draft, which then ripples all the way down the draft, that happened in Mobile, you mentioned it, this idea that the Bengals could take Herbert being credible. And see, I'm curious if you would agree with the reports coming out of Mobile, almost unanimous, that Justin Herbert did what he needed to do to solidify his draft stock, maybe even move into quarterback number 2 or quarterback number 1 and win the week, if you will, if it can be done in Mobile.
Yeah, and he did do that. All the reports are true. That's one of those things, like sometimes you get reports like, I didn't see that. I remember guys falling all over themselves about Logan Thomas at the Senior Bowl. I was like, nah, I didn't see it. And of course, he didn't play quarterback in the NFL. So when you look at Justin Herbert, I got some news at the Shrine Bowl that, hey, Zach Taylor prefers a body type like Justin Herbert. Not like Joe Burrow's tiny, but Joe Burrow's like an upgrade to Andy Dalton. And, you know, number 1 pick and great, everything positive you want to say about Joe Burrow, go ahead and say it because it's all true. But Zach Taylor might prefer that larger, more Jared Goff-like quarterback in Justin Herbert. The Bengals coached Justin Herbert at the Senior Bowl. We've seen this connection for years and years and years, dating back to, in my memory, Phillip Rivers with Marty Schottenheimer at the Senior Bowl, and the Chargers scoop him up because they love him there. Herbert behind the scenes, that's the most important thing. But on the surface, this guy that didn't have to come to this game, he could have been like Joe Burrow and said, you know, thanks, but no thanks. Don't need to be there. But Herbert did. He didn't shy away from the competition, and he looked really good. Now, mainly safe with his decisions, not checking down, not being like timid or anything as a passer. He'd take the throw and it was there, but he wasn't stupid with the ball. He didn't try to push the ball or force the ball into places that it shouldn't go. So everything that you normally would expect from Justin Herbert was there, and the size and the arm strength and the leadership ability, not quite to Carson Wentz's leadership ability at the all-star practices, but Justin Herbert did his thing. It is behind the scenes that the Bengals and other teams will need to be doing investigations on, because Herbert, known as a guy that's a little bit quiet, a little bit weird, some people have said. Some people, talk about his maturity and how he went back to school and back to Oregon, didn't really mature as much as maybe some people wanted him to. So that's where the dance becomes more about what's going on behind the scenes. How do teams interview Justin Herbert? How do they view him during that process? Did the Bengals fall in love with him, working with him during the week? Because on the field, he didn't do anything to shy away from a first-round pick, a top 10 pick, and maybe even number 1 overall. But Bloom, it'll come down to what happened behind the scenes. Now, Montez looked better than Jalen Hurts. Matt Waldman had a great comparison for Jalen Hurts. He said he's David Garrard. And I love that comparison. I think it really fits for what Hurts could be, but he's not there. So we're talking, mid-round. Somebody will take a chance on Jalen Hurts mid-rounds. That's fine. Steven Montez has always been toolsy. He was coming out of El Paso, Bloom. I was so excited when CU picked him up out of El Paso. I believe he was a 4-star recruit. And CU doesn't get a lot of guys like that, specifically at quarterback. Montez never really, 1, stayed healthy at CU, 2, wasn't ever consistent at CU. And then during the week, he showed off those tools. I think this type of format is really good for a player like Montez, who's got the release and the motion and the footwork and all those things, but it doesn't add up to consistent production. Someone will take him as a project, maybe throw him on a practice squad. We're looking at, probably 5th round, somewhere like that for Montez. And I'll keep an eye on him in super deep dynasty formats just because we're crazy like that. But Montez did have the better week than Jalen Hurts. Hurts will be drafted higher, most likely.
Moving on to the running backs, and there's a deja vu here. You've got Keyshawn Vaughn from Vanderbilt, LaMichael Pirine from Florida, Eno Benjamin from Arizona State. I know he's got some fans out there, but Antonio Gibson. And again, we're talking about winning the week. Now that Tony Pollard has made his mark, and wonder what Mike McCarthy and his staff are going to do with Pollard this year, here comes another back from Memphis. Doesn't quite fit in a pigeonholed role when you picture running backs, more of a weapon. tell me about him and the rest of the South running backs.
Yeah, and he's kind of like my Denzel Mims, right? I go into this week, I'm like, Antonio Gibson. I get to watch Antonio Gibson. Yay. And as a big back, 225 pounds and 6'1", we didn't get to see any power. That's not his game, really, which everyone knows I love big backs. But he's a receiver. That's what he is. If Theo Riddick was 225 pounds, that's what he would be. Antonio Gibson's a better runner than Theo Riddick, in my opinion, but certainly line him up in the slot, catches naturally, looks the ball in, has no problem winning at the catch point. Antonio Gibson shined in receiving drills, and that makes him an incredibly intriguing, let's say third round pick, something like that, where he goes in the mid rounds and someone says, I'm not really going to use him as a runner. I'm going to use him more as a big bodied receiver and then let him run at times. Now, he did look swift. I can't say powerful again, because one, that's not his game from film, and two, you don't see that at these all-star practices, but he was very swift, very bursty. I liked how he got to and through the hole. The patience required, these are new blockers in front of him. This is all awkward for everybody, right? Because it's new blockers, new receivers, all those sorts of things. Gibson showed a natural feel for timing when that hole was going to be there. To and through burst was really good with Gibson. One of my favorite players down at the Senior Bowl this year. LaMichael Pirine with that shiftiness and electric ability, looking good out there. And Keyshawn Vaughn, kind of a hard charger as well. Benjamin didn't make my notebook all that much. So again, and it's good to take everything in. You can only watch so much. And Matt and I try to sit in the stands and stay away from everybody so that we can watch practice. I haven't been down on the 10-yard line, Bloom, in like 3 years.
Ooh.
Makes me sad. But yeah, so can't see everything, but those are my notes on the running backs.
Wide receiver group, maybe the one I'm sure you were most excited to see, or a lot of people were most excited to see, Brandon Ayuk, not really practicing. But redemption maybe for Colin Johnson, who had a down senior year, also his Texas teammate, Devin Duvernay, another Ohio State receiver, Austin Mack, Juwan Jennings from Tennessee, and Van Jefferson from Florida. What do we think about the South wideouts?
Yeah, not as good as the North wideouts, but still some really good talent here. Unfortunately, Brandon Ayuk, we didn't get to see. Duvernay, fine. But Van Jefferson, I think it's Van Jefferson. Picking my favorite one, because Austin Mack didn't have quite the Hill-like performance, but Mack showed good strength in ripping passes away from defenders and working sideline routes. I thought Mack ran really good routes this week at the Senior Bowl, this last week. So I would throw him up there. Colin Johnson showing some speed and some separation ability. Juwan Jennings, and I don't read Twitter. I kind of stay in my bubble. Matt told me some stuff about like draft Twitter, and I was like, I'm just going to stay in my bubble, man. Yeah. Like, I can't believe some of the stuff that's being promoted out there. But anyway, I guess that, opinions were split on Juwan Jennings from Tennessee. For me, I immediately fell in love with him because he shows up, he starts running his mouth, right? We've seen that before at these all-star games. The receiver that just can't stop talking, but then he'll back it up. Now, he did have some drops, which definitely the DBs let him know about, because he wouldn't shut up. And every time he'd have something where he couldn't get to the ball, he'd start, raising his arms like, where's the flag? Good thing there's not a ref here, throwing in a bunch of cuss words. So Juwan Jennings, with that competitive spirit, certainly drew my attention. Got to clean up his game, a little rough at times, so I can see why maybe people were split. But then Van Jefferson there, and, in a Hill type of way, or an Ohio State type of way, you see Van Jefferson out there with speed to the catch point, like doing a good job of having a change up within his speed, within his routes, to kind of lull DBs that are trailing him, and then have that extra little bit of burst to go get the ball at the end. I thought Van Jefferson had a really good week of practice with that speed and those ball skills as well. So again, not as much as I love the other teams' receivers, but there's a good crop of receivers that we'll be talking about in fantasy leagues.
Changing speeds is so underrated for wide receivers. More than the burst off the line or the top speed, it's using that change of speeds to set up the defensive back. Tight ends on the South side, Stephen Sullivan from LSU, another player. Remember, Foster Moreau, not necessarily used a lot as a receiver. Is there a lot more there than we thought? Jared Pinkney from Vanderbilt, Josiah DeGuara from Cincinnati, and Harrison Bryant from Florida Atlantic, an intriguing group on the South roster.
Yeah, let's start with Harrison Bryant, who I thought used his frame well during the week to shield the ball away from defenders. But the player that stood out the most at this position on this team was Stephen Sullivan from LSU. Again, just one of those. He's a wide receiver, ladies and gentlemen. That's what he is. But he's bulking up and he's playing tight end. And you saw that receiver like ability, catching passes, no problem, running away from linebackers in the middle of the field. Like this is what he did. So Stephen Sullivan, the player that looked the best because he was a wide receiver. And again, can't really tell from full blocking, all those sorts of things. But Stephen Sullivan was the player that stood out. As another year of the Senior Bowl, Bloom, wraps up, I fought through food poisoning. Oh, this is a story. Wait till Matt tells you the story, dude. I fought through food poisoning and Achilles tendonitis. So, yeah. But I was there. I was in attendance. The only thing I missed was the weigh-in. Unfortunately, I basically couldn't walk. So a little old man syndrome kicking in at this Senior Bowl, but it's been 14 years, Bloom. So, always an adventure.
It is always an adventure, and the adventure really is just getting started for these players and for the draft coverage this year. And it's that time to start to familiarize yourself with the names. Combine is coming up. It's almost February. Combine coming up. Cecil will be there. Cecil's everywhere. What was it from the old message board? I can't remember who it was that said, I'm going to be walking down the street and I'm going to see Cecil Lammey just pop out and mention his name. Yeah. That's our man.
I got an apartment in Indy, by the way, because I do this thing called Stay Alfred, unpaid endorsement, where usually I stay at the La Quinta, but the La Quinta in Mobile last year had like soggy floors. They have a new La Quinta in Mobile, which was much better. Matt and I were very happy with La Quinta. Love La Quinta. Not saying that. But usually I just stay, and it's like a 2-mile walk to the stadium. I don't mind that. Certainly need to get the steps in, Bloom. But I found an apartment that's like 1 block from the circle, center circle in Indianapolis. So I got an apartment for the week in India. Looking forward to it, man. So we'll get back at the Combine once again.
Yeah, the juice is always flowing. Y'all out there, do that for us. We love to bring the best content we can for you here, everyone live on the YouTube channel, of course, subscribers on iTunes, everywhere else that you get your podcast fixes. Thank you, folks. And no rest for the weary. Well, we did get some rest that Achilles cease, but we're going to be back soon to talk Shrine Bowl, Super Bowl, all the bowls, including your bowl salsa, your bowl queso, everything you got at your Super Bowl party.